How do we find the video?
Go to youtube.com and search for SimplyAware.
No space.
No
space.
No space. Okie doke. So, kidneys. Let's look a little bit at the western side of the kidneys. Is marker going to work for me? Wow, I can't spell today. I dredged too many channels. What is the function of the kidneys in the human body?
In the blood.
Yeah. Oh, we want more.
Impurities, toxins. What else?
Related to blood pressure.
It helps, it releases a hormone that regulates blood pressure. Okay. What else?
So question. So if someone's in renal failure, partial, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, they're likely to have blood pressure issues?
Blood pressure regulation can be part of it, yes.
Okay.
But their
There's other
fluid, their
things.
bodily fluids start to become quite toxic.
Stagnant.
And it's a stagnation, but it becomes quite toxic. Electrolyte balances start to go off big time.
And that's called renal failure, right?
Renal,
Yeah,
kidney,
okay. Yeah,
renal
kidney,
failure.
okay,
Mhm.
I was just clarifying.
Right, and one of the interesting things with regards to renal failure is, and as we age, the kidneys start to weaken, right? And so when we're talking about like impurities and toxins, we can put medications in here too,
Yeah,
right? And so one of the things that happens, particularly as we get older, so let's say we have 100% renal function at age 50, and typically after about the age of 65, we'll start to see a declination. And so let's say, just rough numbers, 90% function here. Well, if I started taking blood pressure medicine here at X dose, and I don't get a renal test, I don't get functionally tested to make sure my kidney output is maintained, then this dose at this function level is too high. Does that make sense? So as we get older, as our renal output starts to decrease, if we're taking medications on a regular basis, we need to make sure that we're having renal function testing and the meds are being adjusted accordingly. Otherwise, we start to build up toxicity. Can't keep up. And this is where side effects from medications and things like that start to get more intense. So if a side effect of a medication can produce dizziness, nausea, as the concentration is stronger in the body, those side effects become stronger. Does that make sense? So from a Western side of things, there's more that the kidneys are doing. They're very responsible in the production of red blood cells. Golly, can't spell today. Okay, and so with that, we're starting to see relationships with different parts of the body. So the kidneys are not a standalone functioning process, right? Even in Western medicine, they're related to the urinary bladder. because this is the output valve, or the output reservoir that then evacuates the filtered fluids from the body, right? Regulates fluid levels. Okay.
With electrolytes?
Mhm.
Uses-
Yeah, salts and that in the body. Something that gets overlooked a lot is the production of vitamin D.
Seriously?
Mhm.
It's an active form of vitamin D, but it is vitamin D. And we've been told that it
Active for me.
means it's the most functionally used by the body. But we have to drink our milk, otherwise we don't get any vitamin D. It's important to get sunlight. I mean, we're plants after all. Yeah. I mean, we get watered, we grow, we're plants. So, there's a lot that the kidneys on the western side of things do. And what's interesting is in eastern side, you know, kidneys are considered batteries. In a sense, and I'll explain that. I'm going to get a little bit into some deeper medical Qigong theory here, but you have Qi is something that we talk about, Qi, life force, life energy and stuff. You have prenatal and postnatal. Right? Before birth, after birth. Not literally after, no. I can't believe I just did that on video. Okay. If you look at...
You remember what you said, you're just gonna give a pronouncement. This one, what?
If you look at this as a battery,
Okay.
we are born with prenatal Qi. Okay, that's what we come in with. And let's say that prenatal Qi is this. Okay? And we have a measure of postnatal Qi. Postnatal Qi comes in what we eat, the air we breathe, the liquids that we bring into the body, the cultivation practices that we do like Qigong, Tai Chi, things that are nourishing to our energy centers as opposed to draining of our energy centers. Does that make sense? So, let's say when we're born, we have our prenatal Qi, nice and juicy. We'll give ourselves even more prenatal Qi here because we haven't had a lot of life experience yet. And then we have this postnatal Qi. And I'm simplifying quite a bit because I don't want to go down that deep rabbit hole. But in essence, we feed the baby, so like early on, hopefully mother's milk, nursing, and then if you notice, in infancy, the mother's milk adapts to the nutritional needs of the baby. So early on, it's very thick, very rich, and very creamy, and then it continues to thin out as the baby needs less and less of that particular level of density. And so it adapts and adjusts to the baby's needs, but and initially the baby is almost, I don't know exactly, but I would say there's a very high percentage of prenatal Qi that's there. As they start to get active, and if you're anything like my kids, they didn't always eat. Sometimes they didn't eat well, school lunches, whatever. And so they're using a lot of energy, they're expending a lot of energy. Our brain expends about 20% of our energy. So you think about a kid in school that's really working hard, 20% of that energy is brain energy. It's being used in our body, consuming calories and such. And if we don't continue to nourish that, we start to deplete our postnatal. So if we're not continuing to nourish, then we start to deplete our prenatal reserves. These are reserves. Again, I'm keeping things relatively simple here. Basically, the way it's described is when we're out of prenatal Qi, when we're out of what we came in with, we're gone. Prenatal Qi cannot be replaced. Kind of like the aquifer water, sure. I don't know that that's, to me, when you look at water, it's like if an area has been like plenty of water and now there's no water, well, that water's not gone, it's just somewhere else. Right? This is gone. And so if we get to a point where we're not nourishing with postnatal Qi, good nutrition, exercise, proper exercise, cultivation practices and such, we continually drain and deplete our prenatal Qi until the point where we don't have anything left. Dun dun dun. Key music, dramatic music. And so our job is to not tap into the reserves if at all possible. To continue to nourish the postnatal Qi to the best of our abilities with good nutrition, with things that are nourishing to not only our physical being, but our mental and emotional being as well. Because, you know, think about, you may have somebody like this in your life or not, but maybe there's somebody in your life that is very high maintenance. They need a lot of attention, they need constant reassuring, and that it can be draining, or if they're just constantly demanding on your time. I think of children. They're completely dependent on you, for an extended period of time. And so you don't have, if you want to be a good parent, you don't have a choice. You continue to do and be. I remember a time in my schedule where, Fane and I's schedule, where with our three boys we had an elementary school schedule, a middle school schedule, and a high school schedule. We had music schedules for band. We had a Cub Scout schedule and a Boy Scout schedule. And we were juggling this every week. And then our youngest son came and said, I want to go play hockey. And I was like, well, let's sit down and look at the schedule and see where it can fit, right? And see what we can do with it. But that was a significantly draining time in our lives as parents when we're giving everything we can. And I would suggest that that is a time when not only we're using up our postnatal Qi, but we're also tapping into these reserves. Qigong healers, there's a lot of stories of Qigong healers in China that die in their 50s or 60s because they're giving away their energy to help others. And it's, the thing is if I'm doing my job properly, I'm not using my energy to do that kind of work. I'm just a channel, I'm just a vessel. I need to be out of the way. I don't want to be using my reserves to help somebody on their healing path. Does that make sense? There has been times when I've been in clinic and I've had somebody that needed my attention, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't do this level of work today because I'm not there. I'm not energetically available to it. So if my concentration level, if I'm tired, if my pain levels are too high, if there are things that are going to distract me from creating that connection that lets me use other to do the healing work, to do that kind of nourishing work for somebody else, then I'm not going to do it. Because that's tapping into my reserves, and I'm a little too selfish for that. What?
Well, how do you balance that, Chris? I mean, how how long did it take you to find out how much you could give?
I'm not giving. Think of it. Think of it like a. Let me think of a good metaphor. If you need to be filled up with water, let's say you're just an empty bag of skin and you need full of water. Okay? If I can access a hose and I'm holding the hose and I'm filling you up, that's not my water, right? If I'm in alignment, if I'm in a good place, then I have access to that and I can give it to you, I can guide it towards you, but I'm not using my own. Whereas if I'm the one drinking and then I'm just, it's moving through me and then going to you, then that's potentially depleting me. Or if I don't have access more, I guess a better metaphor there, or a better example there would be if I am not strong enough to get that, and I'm just giving you what I have. That would be a better way to.
Or if in life we have emotional stresses or physical, if one or the other of those outweighs at that time and we're not handling it well, we deplete if we get demands.
Yes, yes.
So we just really, this balance is the key to everything.
Yes.
Well, I mean, you said that before, but.
Well, it's a different way to look at it.
It's a different way to see it.
It's a different way to look at it. And so we're looking at understanding that when we're in good alignment, and this isn't perfect, it's just clear. I want to have my mind quiet, my emotions settled, and my body relaxed, right? We talk about that a lot, but if I'm in an uproar one way or the other here, I'm going to have a blockage of being able to keep myself nourished. If my mind is racing and I am overwhelmed and I'm anxious, that's exhausting. It's draining, right? If I'm emotionally strained, like this week has been very emotional for me. I've watched, I've got a cat who's very attached to me. Fane says he's my human. I'm his human. Could be the other way around. I've watched him die. He died yesterday.
Oh.
And so he's been starving himself. He has an autoimmune disorder, had an autoimmune disorder. I couldn't do enough for him. I could get his energy up a little bit, but then it would drain right away. He refused to eat. I tried all sorts of things, and then it just got to a point where the doctor's like, I don't know. And we're like, this is what he wants. And so we just made him as comfortable as possible, and
What was his name?
Lip. We're Shameless fans, and I'm shamelessly it. The reason he came to us as a stray a couple of years ago, and he had a very serious lip infection.
Oh.
And I didn't know it at the time, but it was part of that autoimmune disorder that he had. He had a lot of issues that way. And so we took him in. I mean, he just came to us. We didn't have to like catch him and do all of that. He just came to us. Said, please help. So we helped him, we nourished him, we worked with him. And he was a great cat. But it's been a hard week. Actually, it's been about 14 or 15 days that I've just been trying to help him along this and trying to get him to want to stick around, but he didn't. He just absolutely refused. And so eventually his kidneys gave out. What Western medicine calls kidney failure. Right? The toxicities levels in his body raised to a level where he died. So that's been weighing on my heart. So my energy hasn't been where it normally is for me this week. And my attitude hasn't been where it normally is this week. I'm more likely to tell somebody to go take a long walk on a short pier this week.
Well, did this help you make a decision on your doctor?
What?
This week and the stress, were you also thinking through
The doctoral program?
Yes. Mhm.
That's been on my mind for a while, and it's kind of like opening this training center. It was like, if not now, when?
Just the timing.
The timing. He doesn't do the doctoral program all the time. You know, it's not like an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
So he's like, I'm opening it up next year, and I'm like, okay,
I think
I need
that's
to be
great.
there.
I think it's wonderful.
we'll see. I'll tell you how wonderful it is when I'm in the middle of it. So there's a lot more we can cover on the kidneys with this, but I want to kind of touch base on this perspective. We come in with a charge. If you look at it from a battery perspective, we come in with a charge, and wow, interesting. Lithium-ion batteries. You can charge them and recharge them only so many times before they stop taking a charge. So another way to look at it. So the trick is to keep your prenatal out of the equation of your day-to-day. If you're tired, rest. This time of year, kidney energy, water, yin is rest. Don't take on major projects right now. Cheryl.
Impossible.
I understand. But if you're going to do that, then you have to make sure you leave time for you to nourish. This is a good time to do bone broths. Bone broths. To nourish the minerals, electrolyte balances, things like that. Water. Yes.
So this is starting tomorrow and it goes 6 weeks?
Till the spring equinox. Riri. So is that March something? I didn't look at the date.
Yeah, March 20th.
And so we'll be exploring kidneys for a while. Exploring the Qigong practices. There's a lot of different Qigong practices that I can give you to nourish the kidneys, and we're going to be playing with those. We may experiment with, I don't know, we'll see where it goes. But any questions on this? Pre, postnatal, all that kind of stuff?
No, it's a good analogy.
Thank you. All right, so let's look at this model more, right? So kidneys, emotionally we have fear and wisdom. When we're looking at the yin-yang cycle of the dance in the 5-element practice, we're looking at recognizing what's, if we're having a fear lift in our body, it's a rising energy, it's coming up. That triggers I found something really interesting that also relates to bone and kidneys, because the tissue of the kidneys is the bone. The sensory organ of the kidneys is the ears. Okay, the taste of the kidneys is salt. So if I'm craving salt, give your kidneys a little love. Not too much. But what's interesting is, for a long time, Western medicine didn't really draw a line between kidneys and bone like the Chinese medicine did. And then it's like, oh, where is it? Red blood cells. Well, that comes from the bone marrow. That comes through the bone. But the hormones that do that are regulated through the kidneys. So it's fascinating to me how we have a lot of Western awareness and science and everything, and there was a recent study, and I probably need to find it and post it, but they found that on top of the kidneys are the adrenal glands. When we have a fear response, we get triggered. The adrenals, supposedly, and for a long time we believed that the adrenal epinephrine, norepinephrine would come in and boom, right, push the body and kick that fight or flight on. They found recently that there's more of a prevalence of a bone-produced mineral. I was like, is that the door? A bone-produced mineral that is more prevalent than adrenaline in the blood when there's fear, and it's there first. So the bones react to the fear faster than the adrenals do, which is really interesting. And it's an initial study. I don't know where it's going to. Yeah. Well, the thing is that's interesting about that for me is I start to look at osteoporosis.
Right.
Right. We live in a society that is like saturated in fear everywhere we look. We're saturated in fear if we allow ourselves to go there. You know, I've got friends that are like wrapped all around the political cycle going on right now. It's like the Democratic debates is an example. You know, there was like 20-something people on stage just 6 months ago or whatever. It's like, talk to me when there's like 3 of them. I don't want to see all the drama and all of that prior to. You know, let them weed themselves out. They're weeding themselves out anyway. So let them weed themselves out, and then we'll see who's left. But that's an example where there's a lot of fear mongering. Fear is a strong driver of humans. They've seen this. Marketing is driven by fear, much more than pleasure.
So, when you say the bones feel it before the adrenals and the kidneys, right? Is that what you said? Okay. So,
According to this most recent
Yes.
study, the chemistry that comes from the bones into the blood happens first, and then the adrenals will come.
thank you. So, if that expression, I feel it in my bones.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've studied was that intuition in the Eastern philosophies I've studied, which is not Qigong, the blood and the skeleton are for intuition, and that's this. So it's hard to distinguish between, it's hard to say who comes first. So do you have any help for where we go if we're interested in intuition for Qigong? Which field?
Trust,
So spleen.
earth energy, spleen. To me, that's where it starts. Because trust starts with, in order for my intuition to develop, I have to trust that I can have intuition. I have to trust what it's telling me. I have to be able to discern what I think is intuition versus what I feel is intuition. And that comes from that deep grounding and sense of trust first.
And your bones feel the earth energy pretty well.
Yeah. So when we're looking at like the balance of fear and wisdom, give me some definitions of wisdom. As we start this exploration, what does wisdom mean to you? Embodied? What is embodied? Arrow?
It's not just up here, it's all over.
Yeah, so it's knowledge. Knowledge is something you know. Wisdom is something you are. You have embodied it. You've created that. It's not a I think, it's I know. Right? I wish. Well, I guess enlightenment would be the optimal level for this level of existence, the optimal level of wisdom. Wisdom embodied, in the sense that, enlightenment is about recognizing, there's a lot of different perspectives on it, but in my framework, I see it as recognizing that there is no separation between us, there's no us, there's just this. And the connection we have with all creatures and beings helps us to nourish that ultimate compassion and create that environment where we are present to all things, not omnipotent, right, or omnipresent, but just being able to recognize that it's not about them or us. It's about just being present, being fully in this moment in time and recognizing that that's really all there is. It's a work in progress in my mind and my heart, but enlightenment is like, I like the word sensei in Japanese martial arts because it roughly translates to one who has walked before, right? And so it creates that, it's not that I'm all the way at the end of the road, it's that I'm a little bit ahead of you, and so maybe I can show you something, right? For a long time I had issues with sharing with people that were older than me. I taught kids for a long time, martial arts and such, but then as I started working with, back in 1993, I started working in nursing facilities and such, and I'm working with, 80-something, 90-somethings, and I'm feeling like, what the hell do I have to share that they don't know, or that they haven't experienced? And it took me a while to understand that it's not about how old I was, it's about the path I've walked, and it's been different than everybody else on the planet. And so my perspective on things is unique to my life experience. And if somebody wants to learn about that perspective, then sharing is my obligation. And for me, it's really important to be able to have a two-way street. That's why I ask you guys for feedback and perspectives and challenge me. And if I say something that doesn't ring true for you, bring it up. Let's talk about it, because I can learn from you equally, often more. So when we look at wisdom, it's about that knowledge that's embodied in the being, creating that space where I just know. I know, like Jeannie said, I know down in my bones. There's no doubt. And that has to be coming, in my mind, that has to be coming from a place of trust. And if you look at the relationship here on the chart, from the spleen, trust energy, to the kidneys, this is the grandmother. Trust is the grandmother to the granddaughter. It's the controller. So if I trust deeply, then I'm going to embody that wisdom more readily. And in all the work that I do, particularly clinically, one of the most significant things that I see is just a severe lack of trust. And trust in self. I can't trust any of you unless there's a part of me that trusts my opinion of you, my perspective. Does that make sense? And that doesn't come easy for me. You've seen me with the salesmen that come in the door. There is not an iota of trust in me about them. What the hell are you doing in my space? You're interrupting my class. But there's that, but when I get to know you and I trust my instincts about people greatly, I've worked to refine them. And I'm sometimes wrong, but when I get to that sense of trust, then I can open space for that person and be there with them holistically, whole being. Right? And so where we struggle so much as individuals with our self-esteem, with all of these things that are stumbling blocks for us, the not good enough engine and that kind of stuff, really falls into trust. We've either been taught or have a library of stories in our mind of ways that we have not been trustworthy, or we have been failed. We've trusted something and it failed, right? I'm telling a little bit on, I know of a child who's an adult now that still refuses to ride a bicycle because when he was younger, he fell off the bicycle when he was trying to learn how to ride without training wheels, and his trust, the little fragile trust that was there, is gone. Gone. his father has tried very hard to encourage him to find that trust, because his father knows that it can impact his self-esteem. Yeah.
Can you help me with this definition? It's got like 3 parts. So there's wisdom, and it's like, the definition's like, well, how do you achieve wisdom? How do you acquire that? And so the answer in this puzzle is good judgment. That's how you acquire more wisdom. And then how do you get good judgment? And you get good judgment from bad judgment, because you've learned, you've made enough bad judgments that you then know good judgments, and then you know you're more wise. Does that fit into anything that we're doing?
I can see that. Alice, do you have something there? You look like you're ready to.
Well, I think it all relates to everybody has a frame of reference. I see wisdom as a part of what everyone's responded, but wisdom is when you run into everyday circumstances, or especially in what I do with children
Right.
and so forth, you don't want to mislead, but you're coming from your frame of reference. You use the best knowledge you can, but you let them know you're always learning. So we're learning from everybody, I see, without judgment necessarily. You're seeing it and evaluating and trusting because you've done this before. You've seen it happen this way over and over and over. It seems to be a principle that everyone sees eventually. It's not like you have the answer to everything.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you may not have the exact answer, but this is, to the best of my knowledge, the way it is.
Doesn't it boil down to your own truth?
What is truth?
I mean,
We're
you
getting
can have something
philosophical.
work for you over and over and over, and it works for you, and it might not work for somebody else.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, we are, each one of us in this room, each one of us on this planet are a unique expression of human being.
Mhm.
There's never been a human being like us before. There will never be another human being like us after, because we are a unique expression of experiences that we've had to this point in our lives.
And I love all of these human beings in this room. And I have to go because I have to go to work. But I hate to leave. This is a really good session. Everybody have a nice holiday with your family.
Thank you, Alice. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Experiences is important to building a foundation.
When you're a baby, you can't do judgment because you're a baby.
Right. Well, I don't know, babies can be pretty judgmental. Have you ever given a baby squash? They're like, what the hell is that? That looked pretty judgmental to me, especially on my
Okay.
shirt,
Okay.
But it's a very it's not a thoughtful, it's just, I'm just playing. But the experience is a great teacher, yes. I look at it like I was a climbing instructor for a long time, and I coached a lot of kids, Boy Scouts, off the edge of a cliff. Literally. Go. And there's a point at which they have to trust the gear. They have to trust me, that I have their best interest at heart, and I'm not actually trying to make a pancake. But they end up having to trust themselves, because what's happening there, yes, there's gear, that there's one of the things that, will this rope hold me? Well, what I used to tell them is, this rope is geared for about 5,500 pounds, about a Suburban. You know what a Suburban is? Okay, so unless you ate a Suburban for breakfast, you're good. So, there's the equipment fear, right? And I'm coaching them into trusting that the equipment will support them. They're not going to die. Because this is an intimidating thing. We're talking 30, 40, 3, 4, 5 stories up, and they're rappelling on a rope. They've never done it before. We've practiced in pretend scenarios, but this is the real deal, right? They're perfectly safe. We've got a tremendous track record, but there's a point, like when you're on the edge of a cliff here, got a big support system here, the rope is here, the scout is here, right? I'm here, my foot's here, so I'm kicking them off. No, I'm not. There's a point here, somewhere in here, in this trajectory, where there's a point of no return. It's much more dangerous for them to come back than it is for them to go down. And so when they start to get to that precipice, if you will, that place, then they have to create that trust inside themselves that they can do this. They're not trusting me anymore. They trusted me to get into the system. They trusted me with the equipment and everything, and then as they start going, they get to a point where they have no choice but to trust themselves. And either they're going to go, or they're going to have me pull them back up. My special word for like, okay, we're done, you can quit, and there's no shame or anything, you gave it a good try, was Spider-Man. As a psychological mind mess with them, because they wanted to be Spider-Man so bad.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I don't want to say that and not be going down the mountain. So it worked really well. But the idea is that at some point, the only thing you can do to manifest trust is manifest it within yourself. So when you're standing at the precipice of a change, that trust has to come from inside. It has to. Nobody can manifest that for you. I can like, I'm here and I'm coaching them, I'm giving them guidance and helping to nourish their understanding of what's going on. But at some point, they have to reach that part inside that says, I've got this.
Do you find though that the voice behind the line of kids going end up getting to that point faster because they've already seen the equipment being used, so they trust the equipment? So
In some cases,
trust you.
yes. In some cases, but
Because there's been success before them.
correct. There is that, it's a little bit, but the thing is that it depends on the kid. Some kids will take that information and bring it into their library of awareness, and other kids don't trust themselves enough to accept that information. Their fear levels are so high that they can't absorb what happened to somebody else in a positive way and be okay with it. Some can. Some have enough trust in themselves that they can take this information and say, well, they did, I can do it. They have enough trust there, but it's that precipice of, do I trust myself enough to do this? And we all face this every day in different ways. Just getting in the car. You think about the first time you got in a car to try to drive. Maybe you got a driving instructor, maybe you don't, maybe you just stole your mom's car. I did not yet. Well, maybe I did, but there was, there's that. Sometimes arrogance starts before trust. I can do this. Well, maybe not. But creating that space where there's a motivator, it pushes us into something new that has to come from inside. Now I say that, my first experience with this scenario where I was the one here was definitely driven by fear. Because it was with a drill instructor on a 60-foot tower. And I was more scared of him than the fear of falling and dying. And so it can come from different places, but when we're really working on healing and nourishing ourselves, and we're working on that energy level within ourselves, the most powerful transformations come from nourishing our own wisdom, nourishing our own trust. And so if we're in a situation where we're locked up, one of my favorite questions to ask is, what am I not trusting here? If I'm locked up in fear or anxiety, what am I not trusting? Yeah, you like that? Kat, you've been quiet today.
Busy week.
Okay, I'll leave you alone.
I have a trust story,
Okay.
if I may.
Yeah.
I was taking my granddaughter on a cruise, and we were going to do, I found this most awesome looking rappel thing, which I'd never done rappelling. It looked absolutely amazing, 3 or 4 or 5, and ridges and the whole ball of wax, and I started preparing physically to do that, but that didn't scare me. My fear was at the end of the thing, there was rappelling to get back to ground. I had no idea what that was gonna be, never done it, didn't have any instruction, and okay. So that was where I was climbing up on top of my RV and walking as close as I could to the edge and looking down, and it seriously could have freaked me out. We got there, and it was one of those big tall towers, and there was no other way down, and I was the first one off, and I didn't rappel, you just stepped off. You just stepped off, and someone was in charge of you being safe and getting you down. She had the rope, and so.
So it wasn't as much a rappel
No,
as it
it
was
wasn't.
a lowering?
No, she lowered me, yes, so I
Okay.
didn't rappel, which was better, but on the other hand, I put my total faith in this young
Yeah.
woman. But I looked at her just before I stepped off, and I said, I trust you. And then I stepped off, and then I went, thank you, Jesus. Because I knew it was gonna be okay.
Just in case.
Yeah, just in case. No, it was great. It was so much, but there was no other way to go. But I wasn't that afraid that I would have been if I hadn't been preparing and, pumping myself up with, you can do this, Gloria. Yeah, you wanna do this.
Yeah. Well, you can talk yourself into it up here. You can impose your will,
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did.
which is interesting because will is kidney energy.
Okay, then.
Sure.
Yep.
And so that as I nourish trust, it gives my kidneys the wisdom and the will to move forward. And so in 11 years of doing climbing, rappelling trips with the scouts and doing the towers and stuff like that at the camporees and whatnot, I've probably been involved with watching a few hundred scouts, 12 to 14, 15 years old, take their first rappel. Probably 9.9 out of 10, so 99%, 98, 99%, they get to the bottom and they look up and they go, that was fun! And then they go back and they want to do it again, and they're all standing out there clamoring to be the next one down. And what I saw in them is, at that moment in time, you probably see this with the kids with board breaking. Do you ever do any board breaking with them?
Yeah.
It's similar, because they don't think they can do it, and all of a sudden it's like, bam, and they, they've surpassed something, that there was a fear there, that they had to find the strength inside themselves to do. And then when they get to the bottom, what I saw in every boy that I worked with that did that for themselves is they changed a little that day. Life became a little bit easier, a little less scary, because they had just surpassed something that was really intense for them. Added to the experience level, added to the wisdom. Well, right? So it's powerful. And yes, Jeannie, what you touched on was experience is the teacher to wisdom, and yes, it is. Failure is the teacher.
And
We don't learn as much from success. We become complacent with success. We learn from failure. Failure is necessary. On this level of existence, failure is necessary. I think that the thing that we become afraid of or repulsed by failure is because if we look at it from a soul perspective, our soul knows perfection, if you will. So there's no failure in perfection. So to the soul, you look at failure and go, that's bad. But that's what we're here to do.
you mentioned compassion, and I was thinking self-compassion.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with failure, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else in here for this, but with failure, we have a tendency to look at it as, well, I mean, like yesterday, Faye noticed that my energy was low and was asking me about it, and she said, are you beating yourself up over our cat's death? Because, you know, I couldn't, as much knowledge or experience as I have in so many different realms of medicine and such, and I'm not a doctor, just to be clear, but I couldn't do anything because his will to die was stronger than my will for him to survive. But I still, inside, part of me felt like I failed him. For a little bit. And so, failure is uncomfortable. It sucks. It's painful. If we allow it to, it can really destroy our self-esteem, our sense of
It could throw you into shame, and it's just, I mean, if you.
Yeah, I mean, it can throw you into shame, it can throw you into guilt.
If you put shame and guilt, you're just going into a downward spiral, unless you just see it as an experience that we're gonna learn from.
Well, integrate, yeah, I mean, and so if you take an experience and create a pathway where I've made a decision, and that decision now has some consequences. Some of them may be good, others may be really painful, maybe not even necessarily painful for me, but for others around me. And now I have to integrate that experience. And the only way to integrate, or the way to integrate that experience to me, is to learn from it, milk it for all of the knowledge that I can bring from it, and integrate that into a wisdom inside me, so that moving forward, I have more trust in being able to face situations like that. And if we, the thing, when we look at it from this perspective, if my trust is loose, if my earth energy trust is loose, then that's going to make my heart, my kidneys more unsettled energetically, and so I'm more prone to fear, which then pushes my heart into a state of excitement, chaos. Make sense? Dave, you've been quiet today.
Makes sense. I don't know that I can remember it.
That's right.
Can you say it again?
No, I don't know what I said.
Rerun.
Earth, grounded, trust, right? Kidneys. If this is ungrounded, if I don't have trust, then I'm more prone to fear. If I have fear, I'm more prone to excitement, or not excitement in, oh boy, I'm getting a toy. It's excitement like anxiety, chaos, a chaotic energy in the heart, that tightness and shallow breathing and all the panic attack kind of stuff. And so a lot of times what happens is we get into this loop of, okay, I need to calm my heart. And so, I've worked with people that had such an intense level of anxiety for so long that they developed arrhythmias. And so with that, it creates this environment of, well, I need to fix this. I need to, my heart doctor says I need to do this, or take this medication for the rest of my life, or whatever. And in that, that's a symptomatic treatment. They've done nothing for the underlying mental or emotional strain that is there. make sense? And so for me, when I have somebody like that, I'm saying, okay, where's the fear coming from? And then if there's a significant amount of fear, then it's like, okay, this isn't necessarily the source here. Where's the trust? Why are these people, why is this person uprooted? Feeling vulnerable. And then Gloria, to kind of go into what you were talking about, then, you know, the nourishment for trust, compassion. I have to be kind to myself so that I accept the wisdom that I have at this moment in time. Right? And then if we go backwards again, boundaries, a sense of integrity. I need to be able to give myself space and say, I don't know everything, but I know this. And so I can trust this. And if there's something outside my boundaries that I don't know anything about, I have two choices. I can either find somebody that I can trust that knows that, like a doctor or something like that, if that's a circumstance, or I can go learn about that and manifest that trust. So I'm creating that knowledge base, that wisdom, that then allows me to nourish the trust. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I wanted you to do all the way around.
Well, that's, you know, we've got cycles that operate, control, rebellious. I mean, these can go there's patterns of direction, patterns of nourishing, cultivating flow, like what we do in our Qigong practices, but they can, because every human is different, they can go in all different directions. Our experiences and our perspective on things changes how this manifests. So every time I work with somebody, it shows up a little bit differently. We got a lot more to cover on this. We've touched on a bunch of different subjects. But we could take one and spend the whole time on it. We're going to be working on this for a while. Are there any questions before we close out today? I don't know where we are on time. Oh, okay. You guys like, or is it a holiday thing? You got something going on.
I have so much going on.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for your time and attention, as always. Happy holidays. We will be here next Friday. So if you can make it, great. If you can't, I'll be by myself.
No, you'll be by yourself. Such a beautiful lady.